lesson, Paul continues to teach us to walk worthy of our seated position with Christ in the heavenly realms. But to do that, we must truly understand grace. I could define grace for many years before I actually understood it. But oh, when I did, what a difference it made. What is grace? Well, it's unmerited favor. It's receiving something that you don't deserve. In our case, it's receiving favor with God, eternal life, and abundant life here on the earth. I think grace was always so hard for me to understand because I was raised performing for love and for acceptance, so grace was a foreign concept. I finally understood it when I was in seminary back in the 80s. The courses there were rigorous, the competition was brutal, and I worked hard to do well. It was finals week, and I had studied for many days for one particular final that I knew was going to be tough. Well, there we were. We sat nervously in the classroom as the prof handed out the final, and we were anxious to begin. At least I was. I wanted to get this over with. But before we began, the professor gave us some instructions. He said, read through the whole exam before you begin. Now, I thought maybe he wanted us to pace ourselves. It was long as I read through it, and yes, it was going to be hard. I noticed a number of the other students ignored his instructions, or maybe they were faster readers than I was, but anyway, they were already tackling the test. When my eyes fell on the last question, I could hardly believe what I was reading. It said something like this: one of the core doctrines that we have been studying this semester is the doctrine of grace. In accordance with that doctrine, and as an illustration of grace, you may sign your name at the bottom of the exam, turn it in, and receive an automatic A. Or you may work the exam and take your chances. But if you ever divulge this, you will lose this exhibition of grace. I glanced up at the professor, and he smiled back at me with a little twinkle in his eye. Slowly, deliberately, I signed my name at the bottom and turned in the paper and left the room. Several others followed me in disbelief and silence. I heard that several worked the exam to the end before they saw the grace grade. And one guy even knew the options but insisted on working the whole exam himself anyway and did poorly as a result. I wonder where he is today. I've never forgotten that beautiful illustration of grace, and I've attempted to pass it on. And I'll never forget that professor either. I suppose that it's a tiny taste of how we're going to feel toward God when we fully realize what He's done for us and that we've done nothing to earn this favor. It just makes you want to outserve Him back. And that's the point. That's the beauty of grace. That's the power of grace and the motivation that grace brings. That's how I know that all other religions were just made up by people, because only God would design a faith based on grace. And only God would even think of such a wonderful concept.